In this video, I'm going to walk you through 7 surprisingly common Europe trip planning mistakes, and yes, a few of them sound absurd, but they're real. I've answered thousands of questions from first-time Europe planners over the years, and these are the ones that stand out as mistakes to avoid. I'm Roger from priceoftravel.com. Let's get into it. I used to get questions like this fairly often, usually from Americans. My family is going to visit London, Paris, Venice, and Rome this summer. Where should we rent a car? If you've traveled around Europe before, that sounds like the setup to a Clark Griswold level disaster. But honestly, if you're from the US or Canada and this is your first trip, it's not an absurd question, especially if you're traveling with a group of 5 or 6 people. Renting one vehicle sounds efficient, it sounds simple, it sounds flexible. The problem is that Europe's big cities are actively hostile to drivers. Fuel is expensive, parking is expensive and often hard to find. Many historic centers have restricted driving zones where you can get automatic fines just for entering, and on top of that, long-distance routes are often filled with toll roads. Meanwhile, Europe's train system is fast, clean, comfortable, and designed exactly for trips like this. City center to city center. No airport security, no parking headaches, no wrong turns into a medieval alleyway that was built in 1320. If you buy train tickets a month or more in advance, the fares can be surprisingly affordable, and kids' tickets are often discounted or even free. For a few longer routes, flying can make sense. But renting a car to visit major European capitals, that's almost always the hardest way to do it. Another question I'd get all the time sounded like this. We want to visit France, Germany, and Switzerland, and we've got a week. What do you suggest? On the surface, that sounds a little ambitious, but honestly, it's not crazy thinking. If someone said they wanted to visit Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina in a week, that could be a fantastic trip. The key difference is that you're not really visiting countries, you're visiting cities and specific regions. That's where people get tripped up. The first step isn't choosing countries, it's choosing cities, then building a logical, efficient route between them. In 1 week, you realistically have time for 2 cities, maybe 3 if they're close together and you move efficiently. The sweet spot is usually about 3 nights per city, which gives you 2 full sightseeing days without constantly packing and unpacking. If you're set on France and Germany, something like Paris and Munich works beautifully. And if you want something more scenic, you could pair Munich with the Interlaken area in Switzerland for classic alpine views. Europe rewards tight routes. It punishes bouncing around just to check countries off a list. Choose cities first, keep them geographically close, and your week will feel relaxed instead of rushed. I used to have a very popular article on priceoftravel.com about planning European itineraries, and for several years I answered questions in the comments every day. You might not believe how often I'd get something like this. We want to visit Athens, Santorini, Dubrovnik, Rome, Florence, Venice, Paris, Barcelona, Madrid, Lisbon, London, and Dublin, and we've got about 15 or 16 days. What's the best route? That's 12 cities in just over 2 weeks. Even if you had jetpacks from the future, this would still be a terrible idea. And yet, variations of this were easily the most common questions I received. In fairness, a lot of those cities look close together on a map, and I genuinely admire the instinct to maximize a big trip. If you're flying across an ocean, you want to see as much as possible. But this isn't ambitious, it's punishing. Every time you move cities, you lose at least half a day. Even with short train rides, you still have to check out, get to the station, wait, ride, arrive, find your hotel, check in, and get oriented. By the time you're settled, it's mid-afternoon and you're tired. Travel days are not sightseeing days. If you're planning 2 weeks in Europe, a far better approach is 4 or 5 cities maximum. 3 nights in each is ideal. That gives you time to actually experience the place instead of just photographing the train station. The goal of travel is the part where you're there, not the part where you're in transit. And kind of on the same theme, I'd get questions like this. We're going to Paris and we want to visit the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, Notre Dame, Arc de Triomphe, the Champs-Élysées, the Orsay Museum, Sainte-Chapelle, and Versailles, and we've got 1 full day. What's the best order? Again, I admire the energy. Honestly, I'd much rather hang out with this person than someone who says they want to spend 2 full days inside the Louvre and skip everything else on their first trip. And to be fair, many of those places really are fairly close together. The problem isn't distance, it's time and stamina. That checklist style of travel is exhausting. Even on a random Tuesday in winter with short lines and small crowds, you'd end up spending maybe 30 minutes at each place, and most of your day would be rushing between them. And that's before you factor in meals, bathroom breaks, or just sitting down for 5 minutes because your feet are tired. Yes, you probably could hit most of those in 2 very hurried days. But if you've only got one day, you have to prioritize. Pick the 2 or 3 that matter most to you. Build the day around those, and if you get to a 4th, that's a win. The goal isn't to check every box, it's to actually enjoy the boxes you check. Another common question I'd get, usually from North Americans, went something like this. Me, my husband, and 3 kids are visiting Amsterdam, and the central hotels look small and expensive. We found a place called the Outskirts Motor Lodge that's bigger and cheaper. What do you think? Then I'd look it up and see that it's over an hour by bus from the city center and all the major sites. I completely understand the temptation. When you're a family of 5, paying for 2 tiny rooms in the center can feel outrageous, and a larger suburban place with a familiar name and a lower price tag sounds efficient and comfortable. But in most European cities, this is not a smart way to save money. That 1-hour bus ride into town becomes the first exhausting event of every day. By mid-afternoon, everyone is tired. Your options are either find a bench and try to rally, or take that long bus ride back just for a short rest. And once you're back out there, you're basically done for the day. Dinner options are limited, the evening atmosphere you traveled for is gone. Instead of enjoying the city, you're commuting to it. Yes, central hotels are smaller. Yes, they're more expensive, and yes, family rooms in Europe sometimes feel like they were measured exactly to fit the beds and nothing else. But being able to walk back for a break, reset, and head out again in the evening is incredibly valuable, especially with kids. In Europe, location is usually worth far more than square footage. Another question I'd get far more often than you'd expect went something like this. I want to visit Madrid, Prague, Stockholm, and Dublin on my first trip to Europe. What's the most efficient order? Even when people weren't using impossible time constraints, the route itself could be a head-scratcher. And these weren't prank questions. They were sincere. Someone had looked at a map, picked cities that sounded interesting, and assumed there must be a smart way to connect them. The problem is, to visit those 4 cities, you'd basically have to crisscross the continent and fly between each one. And every time you fly within Europe, you lose half a day. Getting to the airport, security, waiting, boarding, landing, getting into the city, it adds up quickly. Even worse, you're flying over hundreds of fantastic places that are much easier to connect by train. Especially on your first trip, I recommend minimizing intra-Europe flights whenever possible. Choose cities that are connected by fast, comfortable trains. Paris to Amsterdam, Rome to Florence, Munich to Vienna, those routes are smooth, efficient, and scenic. Europe is designed for regional travel. If you build a tight geographic cluster instead of hopping all over the map, your trip will feel cohesive instead of fragmented. And if you want ideas, I have another video with 11 classic and efficient Europe itineraries for first-time travelers, all of which are far easier than trying to zigzag between Madrid, Prague, Stockholm, and Dublin. The last type of question I'd get is really an interesting one. It's not exactly a planning mistake, it's more of a disappointing reality. It would sound something like this. We'll be visiting Paris, Venice, and Rome in July, and we'd love to add a few days at a classic beach nearby, somewhere in between. That sounds perfect on paper, but especially in July, this is where expectations collide with reality. The beaches in southern France and much of Italy are often small, crowded, expensive, and sometimes pebbly rather than sandy. Even when they're beautiful, they can be absolutely mobbed in peak summer, and in many places you're renting a chair at a beach club just to get close to the water. It's not that they're terrible, it's just that they're probably not what you're picturing. Spain and Greece have some genuinely great beaches, but if you're trying to add a quick Mediterranean beach stop between Paris, Venice, and Rome in July, you may end up paying a lot for something that feels underwhelming compared to the beaches you're used to at home. I actually covered this in more detail in a recent video and suggested some much better alternatives. I'll link that below. But the bottom line is this: most of Europe is incredible for culture, history, food, architecture, and atmosphere. If you want world-class beaches, there are better regions of the world for that. Europe rewards you when you lean into what it does best. If you avoid these mistakes, your first Europe trip will feel smoother, more relaxed, and honestly a lot more fun. Europe isn't hard to plan, but it does reward smart routing, realistic pacing, and leaning into what each place does best. If you've made any of these mistakes yourself, and honestly most of us have on our first trips, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you found this helpful, give it a like so I know to make more planning videos like this. And if you're new here, subscribe. I've got a lot more Europe guides coming soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.